So when you have something you're going to do, or you have something planned that's coming up that you have to do in front of people, or something that, I'll say in front of people, how do you deal with those thoughts? What kind of thoughts come to you, and how do you deal with them? And do you go ahead and do what you had planned, or do you opt out?
Typically, I do whatever it is. I have found in my own experiences that my most pivotal moments of growth have been when I've stepped out of my comfort zone and done things that would typically go against what I would initially have the proclivity to do. So I appreciate facing those fears, so to speak, just because I feel like there's freedom in that. I feel freer every time I step out in that way.
Freer how?
That's a good question. I feel more. Wow, that's a great question. Because
I'm sitting up here and I don't feel free. And I did this.
Right.
Not that I feel bad or like weird about it, but I don't know that I feel free.
You know, maybe a better word. I'm glad you asked that. Maybe a better, and I could say ask, but anyway, the moment passed. I saw your nod, Rachel. Anyway, I now pondering it, maybe a better word would be empowered. I feel powerful. I feel like, okay, I did that. I can do anything.
Okay, I'll go with that. Because you're right. If you can do the thing that your mind tells you can't do, you literally can do anything.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'll go with that. What about the lady behind you, in the black? When you have those thoughts when you have something to do, and you have, what kind of thoughts come to you, and do you go ahead as planned, or you opt out?
I think, for the most part, I respect the process. So if I've been asked to do something, I try to step into it. I think if somebody's asked me to do something, it's probably somebody that I respect enough to kind of see it to the end. The thoughts, however, are a bit challenging. That's where the hell comes in.
Challenging in what way?
Because it's pressure. I tend to be a person that is very connected to how people feel or see me. So just the pressure. And then trying to figure out, what do they want? What do they want it to look like? What is it supposed to, like, there's this, like, again, this war inside. It's like, what is it supposed to look like? Is perfection possible? If it's not, how close can I get to it? So I'm definitely not evolved yet. So
Believe me, those thoughts went through my mind too.
yeah.
Am I going to be good at this? Is this, because I really don't do this. This is not something I do. Now I have to do it in front of the people I work with, but it's not televised, or it's not like, it's a little bit different thing. But now that I'm sitting here, it's kind of not a different thing. It's almost the same thing. But I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's, for me specifically, when I'm doing something that I've been asked to do. Again, it's the pressure, because I feel as though now I have this responsibility, this role that I'm supposed to, and just trying to figure out how do they want it to look, and trying to get as close to that as possible.
Yeah, that would cause some fear, for sure. I work with a lot of doctors, and I'll tell you a little story. So it was a Christmas party, and I work in IT, I'm computers, and they invited me for their Christmas dinner. So there's easily 50 people, most of them doctors or nurses, all those types, and here I sit. And they started on that side of the room, and they're going through all of them. All the doctors, the chief surgeon made them get up and stand up and tell what how they, the schools they went to, all their little degrees, all this stuff about them. And I'm sitting there like at the last table trying to figure out what am I going to say? I'm Doug, I fix your computer. So I'm sitting there, and they're going back and forth, and it takes a long time because they all got this list of stuff that they've done. And so by the time it comes to me, I had a little glass of wine, so I stood up, took a sip of my wine, and I was like, I'm Doug, and I'm an alcoholic. they went crazy. But I guess my point is, like, we don't always know what to say or do. And I'm not saying that that's the best thing to say. What I am saying is it's okay not to know. There's no way I could match them for degrees or anything close. And personally, I'm okay with that. I don't care. Like, I do my job the best I can do it, and that's that. So I know somebody else, I think you had your hand up.
You do a good job, by the way.
I'm learning as I go.
It's the only way to do it. You could have told me you had access to all their files, Don't mess with me. I love the question, and to be honest, if it's getting up on a stage or speaking in public to a bunch of people, if that was a scenario, I kept thinking, like, I don't really relate to any of the thoughts beforehand because I performed for 10, 15 years, playing music, different bands, different places. I did a lot of things where I was talking in front of people and leading large amounts of people. So that side of it never really brought thoughts about, but it had me thinking about it from a different angle. That the thing that was difficult for me, where the thoughts would go crazy, is when I'd come off the stage and I'd be interacting with groups of people. And I think there's a vulnerability in that where if you remain the person on the stage, it's kind of annoying. And if you clam up, it's kind of like, oh, who does this guy think he is? And I used to get trapped in the kind of like debilitating thoughts that we speak about when I would be in smaller situations where I had to just present a less crafted, less kind of made up mystique person of who I was. And what happened was I was outward, very just like, I would just be on forward movement, in the social setting. And I used to feel really guilty about it. And then I stopped apologizing for how I was socially, so I wouldn't have to think about it like that. So there was less pinging back and forth in my head while I was being very performative to a group of people. But that didn't help all the way. Just not apologizing just made me feel kind of like a jerk who didn't care what people thought about me, and that didn't work.
Well, you were a musician.
Huh?
You were a musician.
Yeah. And then I stopped defending the way that I was. And I only was able to do that by not really, like, in the long run. I could only do that actually. Like, I started not defending who I was, but I probably was faking it. But later I learned that when I stopped identifying with that thing, that really what we call the not you, right? When I really saw that, I was able to stop defending it, stop making excuses for it, just be. And if someone had a problem, I would just like deal with it in the moment. But that was the only way I was able to shut off those thoughts too. But yeah, you want to just do nothing. And then even as you're doing something, you're like, I shouldn't be saying all this. I shouldn't be doing all this while it's happening. It's a real scary, dark cycle to get stuck in. But now I don't excuse it. I don't defend it. I don't even justify it. Now I can see it in a very clear picture, how it was and how it is, if that makes sense.
Cool. Anybody else? How about you, and then I'll come to James. Him in the purple shirt.
What was the question again?
I'm going to change it a little bit. When you have something to do in front of people, whatever, something kind of serious, how do you deal with the thoughts of not really knowing the outcome?
I try not to focus on the outcome. I just
How?
try to focus on what I have to do.
How do you not focus on the outcome? And I'm asking because this thing, I've only been most of my thoughts were about the outcome, how this is going to look, what's going to feel like, the outcome of it.
I think you can't determine the outcome. I think you just have to do your best, and whatever the outcome may be, that's what it is.
That's true.
I think if you focus too much on the outcome, then it'll distract you from the present thing that you have to do.
You might have answered this, and I might have been in my thoughts. How do you not think about the outcome?
You just do what, like, for example, if I get a phone call saying, oh, you have to go to such and such place because you have to pick up this thing. It's like, okay, I'll just go do that thing. I'm not really looking at what's going to happen after.
What if it's something where you're more in the limelight? What if it's something that, how people say they have like this, what do they call that? Dang, I can't think of it. What if it's something that has to do with your ego? Something like this. You're out in front of everybody.
It's high stakes. There's things at stake.
Okay. It's high stakes. There's things at stake. Your ego is involved, or it could be people are watching you.
Yeah.
How do you not? Something that you're not used to doing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get around that?
I think that people are going to judge you one way or another. I think that's kind of out of your hands.
Yeah.
So it's like, why should you even care about that? And like, yeah, your ego, your sense of self, of how you want to hold on to that self. You don't want it to get damaged. But I think the world is just gonna do that to you anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, I guess you just have to like not care so much, I think.
Because I literally had all those thoughts.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. I know that James had his hand, and then I'll come back.
I was thinking about this just this morning because it crossed my mind an instance in which I was hanging out with a friend, and this friend just approaches strangers all the time. And we were supposed to ask a question at an Apple store to an Apple Store employee. And when I'm looking at these employees, they look like they're talking to somebody else or busy. And I noticed that I have that hesitation where, like, I listen to it, thought, oh, maybe if they're busy, I don't want to bother them. Like, that's like the excuse for basically listening to the thoughts or fear or whatever. And this other person just asks the question, and that's so much more normal.
Yeah.
And it's then the employee can say, oh, I'm busy, hang on a second, or whatever, rather than like causing an awkward judgment situation. Because people just unnaturally judge a shy or weak person. I've thought about one of my old bosses was like an angry person, but sometimes if he had to approach you asking a favor, he would be like all shy and dainty and stuff like that, like trying to be cute almost. And he's like, I would get irritated at him when he would approach me like that, just ask straight up. And I noticed that that's the believing the thoughts and fear spirit that people call shyness, I guess.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with that type of situation. also like approaching women, sometimes if you can psych yourself out into approaching them at the wrong time, in the wrong way, with the wrong words, thinking that you're being right and bold or whatever. And it comes out wrong. And so like both speaking up and not speaking up can be wrong.
Yeah,
Listening to those thoughts.
yeah.
Kind of like what Troy was talking about with maybe coming off wrong to people and then defending it and then getting all up in your ego about it. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, thoughts are pretty interesting. You literally could stop light. People don't even come out of their house because of the thoughts. People freaked out during our pandemic because of their thoughts. So it's a mess. Let me take. I got to come back to Raymond first.
You said earlier, if you have something to do in front of people, what are your thoughts concerning the situation, the outcome?
Yeah, what kind of thoughts do you have, and how do you deal with it? Do you go ahead and do what you had planned to do, or do you not do it?
I simply go ahead and do what I plan to do because that's the reality of the situation. Whatever thoughts I have about the situation or its outcome, it's not real. Only the reality of what I have to do.
That's true. It isn't real. None of it's real. And the interesting thing is that all those thoughts that I had, like some of them I could see almost immediately, but some of them you kind of get caught up in, and you're like, this is what my body does. I'm sure everybody does. But once you get in your thoughts, and I learned this through firearms training because people are kind of scared, right? So what they do is they'll go, and I'm being maybe a little bit over exaggerating, but that's what's happening. They're tense from their ear down to their fingers. That's how their body works. And it's the same thing with this. I'm going through these thoughts, and some of them I get caught up in, and I'm like, it's like, and then just wait a minute, I'm just in the thought, and it's immediately gone. So it's pretty interesting. Nick.
I want to add a little bit to what you guys are saying about the thoughts and not dealing with life, I guess, is that I totally relate, and I realize that I do that because I like to have an answer for everything. Yeah. And it's like my little comfort zone. I need to have an answer for everything. But, many times I won't have an answer, especially if I'm asked to do something like what you're doing. It's like, what am I going to talk about? And I don't have the answer. And I'm trying to get the answer. I'm trying to figure out the answer. And that's where the tension is coming from. In those moments, I don't do it all the time. I literally have to go it's going to sound dumb. It's going to sound Christianese, but I didn't grow up.
Don't say it then. Don't say it then. No.
I didn't grow up Christian, so I never used this language, but I literally have to leave it to God. I have to let's go. You know what I mean? I literally need a supernatural force here to stop me from doing this and then I let it go, and then sometimes it comes to me. It just falls on my lap.
Didn't Joel call that thumping last week?
Doing a little thumping? We're doing a little thumping.
I'm just kidding. What's interesting about that is, like with the story I told about the doctors, I didn't know what I was going to say. Like, how do I keep up with that? Right? Their list is long, and they're all proud of it, really proud. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to say. I wasn't sure. I just wanted to. Honestly, I didn't want to say anything. I just wanted to sit down. But I had a couple of sips of that wine, and I think it just got me talking. But what I learned about myself is that I'm okay not knowing. No matter all the thoughts, no matter all that, I'm okay with not understanding or not seeing myself as, as they see themselves, or I'm okay with not totally knowing. So.